Good morning, Big Ten fans. Welcome to another edition of the Big Ten Morning Minutes. I'm your host, Michael Chen. You can give me a follow on Twitter at MFC2123. It is Wednesday, January 23rd. There's some big news going on in the Big Ten. We'll get right into it, as I think this is the biggest thing to come out of Michigan in a fairly long time. Rashan Gary, although he is projected to be a top 10 pick in the upcoming NFL draft, he's decided to open up his own sports agency, Rashan Gary Sports. He will be the CEO and owner of his company. His mother is going to be along with him. They're going to have aside from himself, four other people involved in it. This is believed to be a first for a player to do something like this before their playing career has started, and it's very interesting to see where this goes. I love the idea of it. I think it's great. I'm wondering what kind of doors it's going to open for other players in the future. He already has a client in Bowling Green defensive back Montre Gregory. This is going to be definitely interesting. Gary ended up at Michigan. He studied general studies with a focus on marketing and sales, so this is definitely right up in that realm. It's going to be very interesting to see if he's going to be able to get other athletes. He's not just focusing on football as well, boys and girls. He's going after athletes in all the major sports, so let's see how this develops. I really think this is very interesting as well because, like I said, nobody's ever done this. This is a new frontier, and we're going to see how this goes. You don't rarely see a guy before his playing career has even started set this up. Now, you see athletes afterwards realize, all right, I can get, my life after football has concluded, and I need to get something going. Well, he's already started his life after football. He's created a company. He's getting his life after football going because he's smart enough. Obviously, the young man understood what he was doing. Gary knows that football's not going to be forever, and I like this move. I think it's smart. I think that ultimately I'm not sure if it's going to change the game, but I think on his end, it was a really great idea, and this gives him a leg up into his post-playing career. So, very interesting news coming out of Michigan. I like it. I'm interested to see if some of his Wolverine teammates would potentially follow him to his agency. So that remains to be seen. Kind of interesting that he goes after Montre Gregory from Bowling Green. Obviously, Bowling Green's an Ohio school. Gary's from New Jersey. So there's not much of a connection to Gregory, but still got him as his first client. Obviously, he's going to be a client of himself, so technically they have two clients. But still, I think it's a very fascinating development, and we will see how this turns out, but I really like it. I think it's very, very interesting, and we'll see where it takes Gary because, again, this is something that we've very rarely ever see from a player right as their playing career is getting started. The Fighting Illini had some bad news yesterday as they had two offensive linemen go into the transfer portal as Larry Boyd and Andrew Traynor have entered the portal, and they're going to move on from Lovie Smith and Champaign. That's four total linemen now that Lovie has lost since the season has ended, all either transfers or graduation. And it's unfortunate because obviously Lovie did a good job post-signing day, although his class was kind of short. He did a really good job post-signing day of getting a few transfers, although, yes, Jeff Thomas did leave. Not necessarily leave. He opted not to leave Miami and stay there after Manny Diaz decided to come over. But it's interesting to see that. I think that there's a lot of playing time to be had at the University of Illinois, and for these players to leave, it makes you wonder what's going on over there in Champaign. And we'll see what ends up happening for the offensive line, but not good for Lovie and company to lose two linemen. Moving on to Rutgers, Chris Ash has found his man to lead his offensive line, however, in Peter Rosamondo. Most of Rosamondo's coaching was done in the FCS and D2 level, so it remains to be seen how that will translate over into Division I big-time college football. But I'll tell you this, though. A lot of times, if you can coach and you can coach at different levels, that will translate. So we'll keep an eye on the offensive line at Rutgers and what Rashan ends up doing with that group. But again, coaching is coaching. If you could teach the right technique, get all the players fired up and buy into what you're teaching, it really doesn't matter at what level. As long as you have those qualities, you could do a really good job. So we'll keep an eye on how Rashan will end up doing on that offensive line. 24/7 Sports released their top 32, which basically is all of their 5 stars. It's their final ranking of the season, as National Signing Day is 2 weeks away. The original, the final, the second signing day is 2 weeks away. It's the first Wednesday in February, which is exactly 2 weeks from today. It's the 6th. So with that in mind, they released all their 5 stars, and the Big Ten was well represented. I'll go over the list of guys where they landed, starting with Wisconsin guard Logan Brown. He ended up 7th overall nationally. Penn State had a pair of linebackers go back-to-back at 12 and 13, and Brandon Smith and Lance Dixon. Ohio State had their defensive end commitment, Zach Harrison, checking in at number 22. Right behind him at 23, University of Michigan safety Daxton Hill. And then Purdue defensive lineman Karlafitz, he's checking in at number 27. And rounding out the last player in the Big Ten, Ohio State's wide receiver commitment at 29. So a very strong group of high-end players are entering the Big Ten for this coming season. So those guys typically don't redshirt. They usually get on the field very early. It's very rare to see a 5-star nowadays sit on the bench and wait a few years, unless obviously they were completely overmanned. But usually you're going to see a lot of these 5-stars come up and play early. So all those names will potentially play out into a decent amount of playing time come early next year. On to the hardwood. Couple things happening yesterday as Indiana guard Devontae Green, he's a junior. He has been suspended for an unspecific time frame, along with unspecific reasons as well. So as soon as we find out why the suspension happened and the length of it, we'll fill you in on that. It is obviously a developing story, as they had a game yesterday, and this was announced right before, as Green will be unavailable and out for who knows how long. And another note, Ohio State sophomore forward Kyle Young, he's going to miss a significant amount of time with a stress fracture in his lower right leg. And it's a big loss for the Buckeyes, as they saw Micah Potter right before the season. He ended up transferring to Wisconsin, so he's going to have to sit out a year and be eligible for next year. And their front court is pretty thin now, as obviously losing Potter and then losing Young. Caleb Wesson, who has played very, very well at a very high level inside the Big Ten and outside of it as well. He's their main man in the middle, and they're going to have to rely on Jadon Ledee, a freshman who hasn't had a lot of minutes, who looks fairly raw from the few games that I've seen him play in. He looks like a raw guy, so that's unfortunate for the Ohio State team. 4 losses in a row at this point in time, and losing a significant contributor for a fairly long amount of time. Never good, but there was some good news coming out of Columbus for the hardwood yesterday, as they're going to get set to play Purdue tonight, and they are going to honor Tyler Trent, which I think is really neat, because obviously the whole Tyler Trent thing happened with the football game against the Buckeyes, where obviously the Boilermakers upset the Buckeyes. And you'd figure there was probably a little bit of resentment towards Tyler Trent. But for Ohio State to honor the young man after he passed a few weeks ago, I think that's really neat. I think it shows, obviously the The school obviously thought that it was definitely well worth it, and I think so as well. Obviously, Tyler Trent touched the hearts of a lot of people nationally, and I think this is a good look for the school, realizing that sports, they're important, obviously, but life is way more important than sports. And to recognize this young man, it shows what kind of university that Ohio State is, and that they actually care. And it's not just all about the athletics at Columbus and for the Buckeyes. So that's going to wrap it up for today's edition of the Big Ten Morning Minutes. Obviously, a lot of stuff going on, so I had to report that. But give me a follow on Twitter at MFC2123. We'll obviously tweet out a lot about college football as well. Unfortunately for me personally right now, my cable is out, so this is a little bit rough, but obviously, you're going to get as much as I can do with what I have going on right now. I appreciate the listening. Have a great day, Big Ten fans.